I never thought I'd see our family's century-old farm sold off like a cheap roadside souvenir, but that's exactly what happened last spring. Standing in our weathered kitchen, watching my parents sign away 5 generations of history to the Highland Development Corporation, I felt physically sick. "Mom, Dad, please," I begged one last time, my hands gripping the worn edges of Grandpa Joe's old oak table. "This land has been in our family since 1923. You can't just sell it to become another soulless subdivision." Mom didn't even look up from the contract, her manicured nails flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. After her promotion to senior partner at her law firm last year, she'd stopped having time for anything that didn't come with a hefty price tag attached. "Sarah, honey," she sighed, using that condescending tone that made me feel like I was still 12 instead of 28. "It's just empty farmland. The crops barely break even anymore, and the development company is offering $3 million. Do you know what we could do with that kind of money?" Dad at least had the decency to look somewhat conflicted, his weathered farmer's hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Your mother's right, Princess. Times change. We're not farmers anymore. Haven't been since your grandfather passed." The memory of Grandpa Joe hit me like a physical blow. He passed away just 6 months ago, and already they were dismantling everything he'd built, everything he loved. "He trusted you to protect this place," I said quietly, my voice trembling. His last words were about the farm. His last words were delirious ramblings about treasure and secrets. Mom cut in sharply. "Really, Sarah, I expected this kind of romantic nonsense when you were younger, but you're an agricultural scientist now. Be practical." That was rich, coming from her. Mom hadn't spent a single day working this land. She hadn't been there during the drought of 2015 when Grandpa Joe and I worked 18-hour days to save what crops we could. She hadn't helped us dig irrigation channels or repair fences or deliver calves in the middle of the night. She hadn't been there when Grandpa Joe would sit on the old porch swing every evening, telling stories about our ancestors who'd built this place from nothing. About great-great-grandfather William Montgomery, who'd first claimed this land, who'd chosen this specific plot for reasons he'd only ever share with his own son. "The land keeps its secrets," Grandpa Joe used to say, his eyes twinkling. "And one day, when the time is right, it'll share them with someone worthy." Mr. Davidson, the development company's representative, cleared his throat politely. "Mrs. Montgomery, if you could initial here and here." His eager voice snapped me back to the present. I watched in helpless fury as my parents signed away our heritage. 500 acres of prime Pennsylvania farmland, land that had sustained our family through the Great Depression, through wars and droughts and everything in between, reduced to nothing more than dollar signs in their eyes. 30 days, Mr. Davidson said smoothly, gathering up the contracts. "We'll begin preliminary surveys next week, but you'll have 30 days to vacate the property completely. The company is happy to provide moving services, of course." "That won't be necessary," Mom replied briskly. "We've already purchased a condo in Philadelphia. Sarah can handle clearing out the farmhouse. It'll give her time to adjust to the situation." I stared at her, blindsided. They'd already bought a condo. How long have they been planning this? "Of course," Dad added quickly, "you're welcome to come live with us, Princess. There's no need for you to stay at that little research facility. With your degrees, you could get a corporate job in the city." "I'm staying at the Agricultural Research Center." I cut him off. "My work on sustainable farming practices actually matters to people who care about the land." Mom's lips thinned with disapproval. "Still throwing away your potential on playing in the dirt. At least this sale means we won't have to watch good land go to waste on your experimental organic farming notions anymore." The casual cruelty of her words left me speechless. I'd spent the last 3 years implementing new farming techniques on our land, working with the research center to prove that traditional family farms could be both sustainable and profitable. The test plots had just started showing promising results. But none of that mattered now. Not to them. Mr. Davidson stood, offering his hand to my parents. "Congratulations on the sale. Highland Development will transform this property into the most exclusive residential community in the county. The Montgomery Farm Estates will keep the name, of course, to honor the heritage." I couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing my jacket, I stormed out of the kitchen and into the crisp spring morning. The farm stretched out before me, morning mist still clinging to the fields where the first green shoots of this year's crops were just beginning to emerge. Near the old barn, a pair of red-tailed hawks circled lazily, the same mating pair that had nested on our property for the past decade. Soon their hunting grounds would be covered in concrete and asphalt, their ancient oak tree cut down to make way for some millionaire's mansion. "Sarah, wait." Dad's voice called from behind me, but I kept walking, heading for the back fields where Grandpa Joe and I had spent so many hours working side by side. It was where he taught me everything he knew about farming, about respecting the land and its rhythms. The memories flooded back as I walked. I was 5 years old, sitting on his shoulders as he checked the irrigation lines. 10 years old, helping him mend fences and learning the property's boundaries. 15, driving the tractor for the first time, his patient voice guiding me through the gears. And just last year, 27 years old with a PhD in agricultural science, showing him the results of my organic farming trials. His eyes had lit up with pride as he'd examined the improved soil samples, the increased crop yields. "You see it, don't you?" He'd asked that day, his voice already weakened by the cancer that would take him just months later. "You understand what this land can do, what it can be?" I'd nodded, not realizing then that we were running out of time, that he was trying to tell me something important. A glint of metal caught my eye, pulling me from my memories. I was standing near the old stone wall that marked our property's southern boundary, and something was reflecting the morning sun. Bending down, I brushed aside some loose dirt to find a small brass key, old and green with age. My breath caught. I recognized it immediately. It was the key to Grandpa Joe's old study in the barn, the private space where he kept all his farm records and family documents, the room he'd specifically left to me in his will, though I hadn't been able to bring myself to go through it since his death. "The land keeps its secrets," his voice whispered in my memory, "until the time is right." Looking back toward the farmhouse, I could see the development company's sleek black SUV pulling away down our long gravel drive. My parents' car followed shortly after, heading toward their new city life without a backward glance. They'd given me 30 days to clear out generations of history, 30 days to say goodbye to everything I loved. But standing there with Grandpa Joe's key in my hand, watching the morning sun climb over fields that had sustained my family for 100 years, I felt something else stirring beneath my grief and anger. Hope. Grandpa Joe had never done anything without a reason. He'd never simply given up or taken the easy path. And in those final days, he tried to tell us something about the farm. Something my parents had dismissed as the ramblings of a dying man. But what if they were wrong? What if the land really did have secrets to share? And what if just maybe I had 30 days to discover them? The key felt warm in my palm as I closed my fingers around it, my decision made. I might not be able to stop the sale, but I could spend these last days uncovering whatever Grandpa Joe had wanted us to know. I owed him that much. I owed the land that much. Behind me, the hawks called out, their cries carrying across fields that had witnessed a century of Montgomery family history. Soon, those fields would be gone, transformed into another cookie-cutter luxury development. Unless Grandpa Joe had left behind something that could change everything. Something hidden in that old study, waiting for someone worthy to discover it. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a smile tugging at my lips. 30 days might just be enough time after all. Game on, Highland Development. Game on. The old barn study smelled exactly like I remembered. A mixture of leather, paper, and the special pipe tobacco Grandpa Joe used to smoke. Standing in the doorway, key still warm in my hand, I felt his presence all around me. The afternoon sun filtered through dusty windows, illuminating dancing motes in the air and casting long shadows across his massive oak desk. I hadn't been in here since before his passing. The room looked frozen in time, farming journals stacked neatly in one corner. His favorite leather chair still pulled away from the desk as if he'd just stepped out for a moment. A half-finished cup of coffee, long since dried up, sat next to a worn notebook. "Okay, Grandpa," I whispered, running my fingers along the desk's smooth surface. "What were you trying to tell us?" The study wasn't large, maybe 15 feet square, but every inch held purpose. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with agricultural references, family photo albums, and meticulously maintained farm records dating back decades. The 4th wall featured a large map of our property, yellowed with age but carefully preserved under glass. I started with the desk drawers, working methodically. The first two contained ordinary items: office supplies, more farming journals, equipment manuals. But the bottom drawer was locked. My hands trembled slightly as I tried the old brass key. It fit perfectly. Inside, I found a single leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. The inscription on the first page made my heart skip. Property of William Montgomery, 1923. My great-great-grandfather's journal. The man who first claimed this land. I carefully turned the pages, his elegant handwriting bringing the past to life. After months of searching, I finally found it. The geological surveys confirm what the old tales suggested. This land is unique. The mineral deposits alone would make a man wealthy, but that's not why I chose it. There are greater treasures here, things that must be protected. A sharp knock at the barn door made me jump. Through the study window, I could see a Highland development truck parked in our drive. Quickly tucking the journal into my bag, I headed downstairs. Two men in corporate polo shirts were waiting, looking impatient. "Miss Montgomery?" The taller one stepped forward. "I'm Steve Randall, Chief Surveyor for Highland. We need to begin our preliminary work today." I straightened my spine, channeling Grandpa Joe's quiet strength. "The contract gives us 30 days before you can start any development work." "The contract gives you 30 days to vacate," he corrected smoothly. "We can begin surveys immediately. We have permits." He held up an official-looking document. My mother's signature was clearly visible at the bottom. She must have signed additional paperwork without telling me. "Fine," I said tightly, "but stay away from the old barn. We're still clearing out personal property." Steve's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, we'll start with the back acreage." I watched them drive their equipment toward the fields, my mind racing. The journal in my bag felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. I needed time to understand what great-great-grandfather William had discovered, what Grandpa Joe had been protecting all these years. Back in the study, I pulled out my laptop and began documenting everything while continuing to read the journal. Hours slipped by as William's story unfolded. He'd spent years researching the specific plot of land before claiming it, following historical records and geological surveys. There were detailed maps, coordinates, and references to something hidden beneath the property. But what really caught my attention were the soil samples. "The mineral composition is unlike anything I've seen," William wrote. "Preliminary tests suggest rare earth elements in concentrations that shouldn't be possible in this region. But there's something else, something the tests can't explain." My hands froze over the keyboard. Rare earth elements, those were crucial for modern technology. Everything from smartphones to electric cars needed them. And they were becoming increasingly scarce. A memory surfaced. Last year's soil samples from my agricultural studies. I'd noticed some unusual readings but had been focused on organic farming applications. I hadn't thought to test for mineral content. The sound of heavy machinery startled me from my research. Looking out the window, I saw several excavators moving into position near the backfields. They weren't just surveying. They were preparing to dig. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Highlands Board is meeting next week to finalize construction plans. Don't interfere with their work. This is happening whether you like it or not." I started to reply, then stopped as another memory hit me. Last Christmas, Grandpa Joe insisting we watch an old documentary about mining rights and mineral laws. At the time, I thought he was just being nostalgic. Now I wondered if he'd been trying to tell us something else. Opening a new browser tab, I began researching Pennsylvania property laws. 3 hours and several legal databases later, I sat back, my mind reeling from the implications of what I'd discovered. The original deed to our property, filed by William Montgomery in 1923, included something called mineral rights in perpetuity. These rights were specifically excluded from any future sale of the surface property, meaning they still belonged to the Montgomery family trust. If there really were valuable minerals under our land, Highland Development couldn't touch them without our permission. They couldn't even dig foundations without risking a lawsuit. But I needed proof. Hard scientific evidence of what lay beneath our fields. My hands shaking with excitement, I called Dr. Chen at the Agricultural Research Center. "Sarah," she answered on the first ring. "I heard about the farm. I'm so sorry. I need a favor," I said quickly. "Remember those unusual soil samples from last year's study? Can we run a full mineral analysis? I mean everything. rare earth elements, heavy metals, the works. That's expensive, she cautioned, and it'll take time. I have some grant money left, and I only need a few days. Please, Dr. Chen. This is important. She sighed. Bring them in tomorrow morning. I'll see what I can do. Next, I called Tom Harrison, my best friend from college who now worked as an environmental lawyer in Pittsburgh. I need you to look at some property documents, I said without preamble, specifically mineral rights from the 1920s. How fast can you get here? I can come tomorrow, he said, concern evident in his voice. Sarah, what's going on? I think my great-great-grandfather left us something more valuable than just farmland, and I think Grandpa Joe spent his whole life protecting it. After hanging up, I returned to William's journal, reading well into the night. The more I read, the more convinced I became that he'd chosen this land for very specific reasons, reasons that could change everything. But Highland Development's machines were already here, their corporate machine rolling forward with the inevitability of a steamroller. I had days, maybe hours, before they started seriously excavating. I needed to buy time. The next morning, I was waiting when Steve Randall and his crew arrived. I'm invoking a temporary stop work order, I announced, holding up a stack of papers Tom had helped me prepare over the phone last night. Steve's face darkened. You can't do that. We have contracts. Check with your legal department, I said firmly. The mineral rights were excluded from the sale. Any excavation could be considered mining activity without proper permits. Your company could face significant fines. This is ridiculous, he snapped, but I noticed him pulling out his phone and stepping away to make a call. By that afternoon, the excavators were being moved off our land. I bought myself a few days, but I knew it was temporary. Highland Development hadn't built their empire by giving up easily. But as I watched their trucks drive away, I felt Grandpa Joe's presence beside me, almost as if he were still here, still protecting our land. I won't let you down, I whispered. I'll find what you were trying to tell us. I'll protect what's important. The hawks circled overhead, their cries carrying across fields that suddenly held more mystery than I'd ever imagined. Somewhere beneath that rich soil lay secrets that had been guarded for a century, secrets that might just save everything we held dear. And I had a feeling we were running out of time to uncover them. The OceanTech Foundation's glass-walled conference room had never felt so suffocating as it did that Wednesday morning, watching security pack up 3 years of research into cardboard boxes. My revolutionary ocean cleanup system dismissed as impractical and delusional by people who'd never even seen it in action. Dr. Chen, Marcus Thompson, the Foundation's director, said with practiced disappointment, "Let's be realistic. Your bioengineering approach is simply too experimental. The board needs proven solutions, not science fiction." I carefully wrapped the model of my cleanup system, a network of engineered microorganisms designed to break down plastic waste without harming marine life. The prototype that had already shown remarkable results in controlled testing. The test results are clear, I said quietly. If you just look at the data from the Pacific trials. Enough. He waved dismissively. Your funding is terminated. The Foundation needs practical solutions, not fantasy projects about plastic-eating bacteria. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and until today, I was the lead researcher at one of America's largest environmental organizations. But I committed the cardinal sin of environmental science. I proposed a solution that seemed too good to be true. Tom John, my research assistant, caught me at the elevator. They're already shutting down the lab, he whispered. But don't worry, everything important is backed up. All the test data, all the genetic sequences. I nodded slightly, touching the hard drive in my bag. The Pacific samples. Safe in a secondary lab. They don't even know it exists. Good, those samples would prove everything. The San Francisco fog felt appropriate as I walked to my car, my mind racing through the events that had led to this moment. The breakthrough had started with a simple observation, a unique strain of bacteria found in the Pacific garbage patch that had naturally evolved to metabolize certain types of plastic. But it wasn't just consuming the plastic. Through careful bioengineering, we'd enhanced its capabilities, creating a strain that could break down multiple types of plastic waste while producing harmless byproducts that actually nourish marine life. My phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Emily Wong at Scripps Oceanographic Institute. Just heard about OceanTech. Those fools. But Sarah, the latest DNA sequencing results. This is bigger than we thought. Emily had been quietly running parallel tests, validating our results without the Foundation's knowledge. She'd seen the same remarkable plastic degradation rates in her samples. The backup lab? I texted back. Fully operational. Your latest batch is showing even better results than predicted. I smiled, thinking of Thompson and the board, so certain they'd shut down a fantasy project. They had no idea that the most important research was happening completely off their radar. The thing about environmental science is that it's not just about the research. It's about funding, politics, and established methodologies. Question those, and you become a threat to the entire system. I learned that lesson 2 months ago when I first presented my preliminary findings to the board. This is nonsense, Thompson had declared, barely glancing at the data. You're suggesting that we can clean up millions of tons of ocean plastic with bacteria? It's absurd. Not just bacteria, I corrected. Engineered microorganisms specifically designed for this purpose. Look at the degradation rates. But they hadn't wanted to look. Traditional cleanup methods brought in reliable funding. My approach threatened that comfortable paradigm. What they didn't know was that we'd already started a larger-scale trial. 3 test sites in the Pacific garbage patch, carefully monitored and showing unprecedented results. Areas where plastic waste was literally disappearing, replaced by healthy marine ecosystems. My apartment felt empty that evening as I set up my makeshift research station on the dining room table. My laptop connected to our secure server, displaying test data that would make Thompson and the board choke on their certainties. The results were undeniable. In just 6 weeks, our engineered bacteria had broken down over 60% of the plastic waste in the test areas. Water quality readings were actually improving. Marine life was returning to previously dead zones. My phone rang. Dr. James Martinez from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Sarah, he said when I answered, I just reviewed your latest trial data. This is revolutionary. How quickly can you get to Massachusetts? I'd met James at a conference last year where he'd shown unusual interest in my unrealistic approach. They seized my official research, I told him. But not everything, I hope. The question was careful, measured. No, the important data is safe. Good. He paused. Because I have something you need to see. Remember those anomalous results I mentioned in my Arctic samples? My heart started racing. The same degradation patterns. Exactly, and Sarah, the bacteria are adapting to colder temperatures naturally. This could work in any ocean environment. I sat down hard, my mind spinning. Independent confirmation from one of the world's top marine research institutions. We need to meet, I said. But not here. They'll be watching. Already planned. There's an international marine science conference in Sydney next week. Thompson and his crowd won't attend. It's too focused on experimental approaches. But there's someone you need to meet. She's been seeing similar results in the Indian Ocean. I glanced at my screen where test data showed the impossible plastic waste disappearing at rates that defied every existing cleanup model. Send me the details. After hanging up, I dove back into the data. The pattern was becoming clearer with each analysis. Our engineered bacteria weren't just consuming plastic. They were evolving and improving in the wild, adapting to different conditions while remaining safe for marine life. My phone buzzed again. A message from our monitoring team at one of the test sites. Dr. Chen, the latest satellite imagery. The plastic concentration is down 70%. Marine life readings are off the charts. What you've created, it's actually healing the ocean. I thought of Thompson and the board, so certain in their dismissal. They called my research impractical, my theories delusional. They tried to bury a solution that could save our oceans, all to protect their funding and reputations. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought stopping official trials would end the research. They didn't realize that 3 test sites were already proving them wrong. That scientists like James Martinez were seeing the same results. That somewhere in the Indian Ocean, more evidence was mounting. Tomorrow, I'd book my flight to Sydney. In 1 week, everything would change. But first, I had data to analyze. Because while Thompson and his colleagues were writing me off as a failed researcher, our oceans were healing in ways that should have been impossible. And that healing told a story that would shake the foundations of environmental science. The fog swirled against my windows as I worked through the night, each data point adding to a picture that was becoming impossible to dismiss. I thought of my father, a marine biologist who died trying to document plastic pollution's impact on whale populations. Sometimes, he told me before his last voyage, the biggest breakthroughs come from the ideas everyone else rejects. He was right, and soon the world would understand why. Part 2. The Tide Turns. The Sydney International Marine Conservation Conference sprawled across the Harbourfront Convention Centre. But the real action was happening in a small meeting room overlooking the water. As I walked in carrying 3 years of rejected research, I knew I found my people. Dr. Chen, Dr. Amara Patel from the Indian Ocean Research Initiative approached, tablet in hand. Your microorganism design is extraordinary. The plastic degradation rates we're seeing, they're unprecedented. I studied her, brilliant, practical, the kind of scientist who cared more about solutions than accolades. This was the researcher James had mentioned, who'd been witnessing similar results in her waters. Show her, James called from his workstation. Show her what happened in your Maldives test site. For the next 4 hours, we compared data sets, my Pacific garbage patch trials, James' Arctic testing, Amara's work in the Indian Ocean. 3 independent studies, all showing the same remarkable results: plastic waste disappearing at rates that defied conventional cleanup models, with marine ecosystems actually thriving in the aftermath. The microorganisms aren't just consuming the plastic, Amara explained, showing underwater footage. Look at this sequence. They're breaking it down into compounds that are actually nourishing the marine food web. The biodiversity readings in our test areas are higher than in untouched control sites. It's becoming a positive feedback loop, I realized. The healthier the ecosystem gets, the more effectively it processes the remaining plastic, James finished. It's not just cleanup, it's restoration. My hands trembled as I pulled up my latest satellite imagery, and the bacteria naturally stop reproducing once plastic levels fall below a certain threshold. They've become part of the ecosystem without disrupting it. Self-limiting, Amara smiled. Nature's perfect balance. The implications were staggering. Current ocean cleanup methods were expensive, energy-intensive, and barely made a dent in the problem. But we found a way to harness nature's own processes to not just remove plastic, but restore damaged ecosystems in the process. My phone buzzed, a message from Tom. Thompson is claiming credit for early research on your project at the EPA conference. Says it was too dangerous to pursue. What should I do? I smiled. Nothing. Let him talk. We have bigger plans. Over the next 3 days, we worked around the clock, combining our data and refining deployment models. Other researchers joined us: a marine biologist from Norway, an oceanographer from Chile, a genetic engineer from New Zealand. Each brought their own insights and validation. It's not just working in one ocean environment, Dr. Johansen from Norway explained, showing his results. The microorganisms adapt to different temperatures, salinities, and plastic compositions. They're evolving in real time to maximize efficiency. Traditional methods missed this approach entirely, James added, because they were focused on physical removal. Nobody thought to look for biological solutions already emerging in nature. On the 3rd day, we presented our combined findings to the conference. The room overflowed with marine scientists, conservationists, and government representatives, people who understood the urgency of the plastic crisis and were desperate for real solutions. The data was undeniable. Satellite imagery showed plastic concentrations decreasing by up to 80% in test areas. Water quality measurements revealed healthier ocean chemistry. Biodiversity surveys documented marine life returning to previously devastated regions. During a break, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Dr. Chen, this is Admiral Lisa Rivera from the U.S. Navy Environmental Division. We've been monitoring your test sites through our satellite network. We need to talk immediately. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Meetings with naval research teams, emergency consultations with the UN Environmental Program, fast-tracked environmental impact assessments from multiple governments. Then came the call that changed everything. Dr. Chen, the UN Secretary General's voice was solemn. We've reviewed the combined data from all test sites. This is unprecedented. The Security Council is convening an emergency session on ocean restoration. How quickly can you scale up deployment? I thought of our samples, our production facilities, our distribution plans. We're ready. The news broke on a Friday morning. Revolutionary ocean cleanup method shows dramatic success in Pacific garbage patch. My phone exploded with messages. Environmental groups, government agencies, former colleagues, and then the one I've been waiting for, Thompson from Ocean Tech. Sarah, his voice had lost its condescension. The foundation would like to discuss your return, with full funding and directorship of a new department focused on bioremediation. No thank you, I interrupted. I'm actually heading to a meeting at the UN. We're establishing an international ocean restoration initiative. I'm leading the scientific team. The silence was delicious. The next months were intense. Training deployment teams, setting up bioproduction facilities, working with governments to coordinate global release strategies. But the results exceeded our wildest hopes. Satellite imagery confirmed dramatic reduction in plastic concentrations across all test regions. Marine life flourished in areas that had been virtual dead zones. Coastal communities reported cleaner beaches and rebounding fish populations. 1 year after my humiliating exit from Ocean Tech, I stood at the United Nations General Assembly, presenting our results to world leaders. Thompson was in the audience. I spotted him in the environmental NGO section, wearing an unconvincing smile as I received a standing ovation. The paradigm shift in ocean conservation, the Secretary General announced, begins today. But the real victories came in smaller moments. A sea turtle sanctuary in Costa Rica reporting record hatchling survival rates. A fishing village in Indonesia seeing fish stocks return after decades of decline. A coral reef in Australia showing signs of recovery after years of plastic-induced stress. James now runs the Atlantic Deployment Initiative. Amara coordinates efforts across the Indian Ocean. Tom leads our monitoring program, documenting ecosystem recovery worldwide. Last week, I received a letter that made me cry. Dear Dr. Chen, 20 years ago, I watched my father's fishing business collapse as the oceans died around us. Yesterday, my son caught more fish in our local waters than I've seen in 2 decades. You didn't just clean the ocean, you gave us back our way of life. Thank you for not giving up when they tried to stop you. Carlos Mendoza, Puerto San Carlos, Mexico. I keep that letter in my office at the new Global Ocean Restoration Center. Next to it sits a framed copy of my termination notice from Ocean Tech. Signed by Thompson. Together, they remind me that breakthrough moments often look like failure to those too invested in old ways of thinking. The center itself is different from traditional research institutions. We encourage innovation, cross-disciplinary approaches, indigenous knowledge integration. Every researcher is taught to look for solutions that already exist in nature, to follow the evidence even when it challenges convention. Thompson left Ocean Tech last month. His replacement has approached us about collaboration, though they call our technology by a different name now. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the oceans are healing. My father's photograph sits on my desk. Sometimes, late at night when reviewing satellite imagery of recovering ocean regions, I imagine telling him about all this. About how his death led to discoveries that are saving the very ecosystems he loved. About how sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the ideas everyone else rejects. The microorganisms we engineered are now deployed in all major ocean garbage patches. The restoration protocols we developed are taught in marine science programs worldwide. What was once dismissed as impractical and delusional has become the foundation of a new era in environmental restoration. Last month, a young marine biologist approached me with an unusual observation. Some of our microorganisms had developed the ability to break down previously resistant microplastics. Everyone says it's just an anomaly, she said nervously. But I think there's something more happening. Look deeper, I told her. Nature often solves problems before we even understand them. Her discovery is already helping us address the most persistent forms of ocean plastic pollution. The old guard still resists sometimes. Change is hard, especially for those who built careers on previous approaches. But the results speak for themselves. Every new satellite image shows expanding zones of recovery, blue spaces where there were once islands of garbage. Yesterday, I spoke at a marine science graduation. A student asked what it felt like to be escorted from Ocean Tech that foggy Wednesday morning. It felt like failure, I admitted. But sometimes, what looks like failure is actually the first step toward breakthrough. The important thing is to trust nature's wisdom, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. The battle for our oceans isn't over. There are still challenges to solve, still damaged ecosystems to heal. But we've changed the approach. We've learned to work with nature's own intelligence rather than imposing our limited solutions. And it all started with a fantasy project and the courage to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles. The last photo I have of my father and me together sits on my desk at Martinez Construction. It was taken 3 years ago, just weeks before his heart attack. We're both wearing hard hats, standing in front of our biggest project yet, the Martinez Tower downtown. Dad's smiling proudly, his arm around my shoulders. He built this company from nothing, and I was supposed to help carry on his legacy. At least that's what I thought. Michael. My sister Elena's voice cut through my memories like a knife. I need you in the conference room. Now. I looked up from the project proposals I'd been reviewing. Elena stood in my office doorway, immaculate in her designer suit, not a strand of her dark hair out of place. Behind her stood Tom Wilson, our HR director, looking uncomfortable. Something in their expressions made my stomach drop. Can it wait? I asked, gesturing to the papers spread across my desk. I'm finalizing the bid for the Riverside development. No, Elena said coldly. It can't. The walk to the conference room felt like a march to execution. Every employee we passed quickly looked away, some hurrying in the opposite direction. They knew something I didn't. The conference room, Dad's old conference room, had changed since Elena took over as CEO 6 months ago. Gone were the construction site photos Dad had loved, replaced by modern art and motivational posters. Elena took her seat at the head of the table, Dad's old chair, while Tom sat beside her. Sit, she commanded, pointing to the chair across from them. I remained standing. What's this about, Elena? She slid a folder across the table. Your termination papers. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You're being terminated from Martinez Construction, effective immediately. Her voice was calm, practiced. She'd been planning this. Tom will oversee your departure process. You can't fire me. I'm part honor. Actually, she cut in, you're not. Dad left controlling interest to me, remember? You're just an employee who's been undermining my authority since day one. I stared at my sister, the stranger wearing Prada and ice. Where was the Elena who used to help me build sandcastles? Who cried when I went off to college? Who hugged me at Dad's funeral? Undermining your authority? I repeated. By what? Doing my job. Managing projects like Dad taught me. By going behind my back to the board. She slammed her hand on the table. Did you think I wouldn't find out about your little presentation? Trying to convince them my modernization plans are too aggressive. Ah, so that's what this was about. The board asked for my professional opinion. I said quietly, and I gave it. Your plan to sell off our equipment division and outsource labor will destroy everything Dad built. Dad's methods are outdated. This company needs to evolve. This company needs to remember what it stands for. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. Dad believed in quality work, fair wages, and treating our employees like family. Dad is dead. Elena's voice cracked slightly. She took a breath, composing herself. And he left me in charge. Not you. The golden boy who always had his ear, who he took to every job site, She trailed off, but I heard the unspoken words. Who he loved more. Elena. I tried again, softening my voice. This isn't about Dad's favoritism. This is about. Sign the papers, she interrupted, or I'll have security escort you out. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should take a moment to. No. Elena's tone left no room for discussion. He has 1 hour to clean out his office. After that, he's trespassing. I looked at the termination papers, then at my sister. In her face, I saw years of resentment, of feeling second best, of trying to prove herself. But I also saw something else. Fear. She was afraid of something. Fine, I said, picking up the pen. I'll sign. Relief flickered across her face. Good, Tom will. On one condition. I met her eyes. I want an hour alone in Dad's old office. No supervision, no security cameras. One last time. She frowned. Why? To say goodbye properly. You can have someone search me before I leave if you're worried I'll steal something. Elena studied me for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. 1 hour. Starting now. Dad's office. Elena's office now was on the top floor of our headquarters. It still smelled faintly of his aftershave, though she tried to cover it with some designer room fragrance. The old leather couch where I used to nap as a kid was gone, replaced by a sleek modern settee. His collection of hard hats from various projects had vanished from the shelves, but the painting was still there. It was a simple landscape, rolling hills, a construction site in the distance, a sunset sky. Dad had bought it at a street fair 20 years ago, saying something about it capturing the beauty of building. Elena had kept it, probably because it matched her new color scheme. Only Dad and I knew about the safe behind it. I waited 5 minutes in case Elena was watching through the security cameras she claimed would be off. Then I carefully lifted the painting from its hooks. The wall safe looked exactly as I remembered, old-fashioned with a combination dial. Dad had shown it to me a month before his death. "Remember these numbers, son," he'd said, turning the dial. 7 to 2483. Elena's birthday. Because no matter what happens, she's still your sister. The irony wasn't lost on me. The safe clicked open softly. Inside wasn't the cash or valuables Elena might have expected. Instead, there was a single USB drive and a letter addressed to me in Dad's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. "Dear Michael, if you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. Elena has made her move against you. I know my daughter, her ambition, her pain, and her secrets. What's on this drive will change everything. But before you use it, remember, she's your sister. Whatever you decide to do with this information, do it with mercy. I'm sorry I'm not there to fix this myself. Know that I'm proud of you, son, not just for what you build, but for who you are. Love, Dad." I plugged the USB drive into Elena's computer, my heart pounding. As files began loading on the screen, my breath caught. Emails, bank transfers, secret meetings. "Oh, Elena," I whispered. "What have you done?" I spent the next 40 minutes reading, copying, documenting. When security arrived to escort me out, I was ready. The USB drive was secure in my pocket, its contents backed up to my private cloud. Elena watched from her office doorway as I carried my box of belongings to the elevator. "I hope you understand," she called out. "It's just business." I stepped into the elevator, turned to face her. "See you Monday, sis." Her perfectly maintained eyebrows drew together. "What? Oh, didn't I mention?" I smiled slightly as the doors began to close. "I'm having breakfast with the board of directors on Monday. I think you'll find my presentation very interesting." The last thing I saw was Elena's face draining of color as she finally realized I found the safe. Dad's last gift to me wasn't the USB drive or even the evidence it contained. It was a choice between revenge and redemption, between destroying my sister and saving her from herself. As I drove home that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky the same colors as Dad's old painting, I thought about his words. Do it with mercy. Monday would change everything. The question was, how would I use that change? Part 2. Legacy of Truth. I spent the weekend in my home office, poring over the contents of Dad's USB drive. With each file, each email, each hidden document, the picture became clearer and darker. Elena hadn't just been planning to modernize Martinez Construction. She'd been systematically dismantling everything our father had built, piece by piece. The equipment division she wanted to sell off, she'd already signed a preliminary agreement with Global Tech Industries at a fraction of its worth. The outsourcing plan, a scheme to fire our longtime employees and replace them with cheaper labor through a company she secretly owned. But that wasn't the worst of it. "Jesus, Elena," I muttered, staring at my screen late Sunday night. "What were you thinking?" There in black and white were emails proving she'd been artificially inflating project costs, pocketing the difference through a network of shell companies. She'd been stealing from our own company, from our father's legacy, for months before his death. My phone buzzed, Elena's third attempt to call me that day. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I opened the last file on the drive, a video. Dad's face filled my screen, recorded in his office just weeks before his death. "Michael," he began, looking tired but resolute. "If you're watching this, then you've discovered what Elena's been doing. I found out about the embezzlement 2 months ago. When I confronted her, He paused, rubbing his face. She blamed me. Said I'd always favored you, always made her feel second best. That she had to prove herself. Son, maybe she was right. Maybe I did favor you, not because I loved her less, but because you reminded me so much of myself at your age. Tears stung my eyes as I watched my father's confession. I planned to handle this quietly, get her help, find a way to make it right. But if you're seeing this, I didn't get the chance. The choice of what to do now falls to you. The video ended. I sat back, memories flooding in. Elena at 5 following me around construction sites with her toy hard hat. At 12, winning the math competition she'd studied months for. At 18, choosing business school instead of engineering, trying to forge her own path. My sister. My responsibility now. Monday morning arrived clear and cold. I parked my truck in the Martinez construction lot one last time, noting Elena's Porsche already in its reserved spot. She'd been here early, probably trying to figure out what I found, what I planned to do. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:30, finding Elena pacing outside the conference room. Michael, she called out, her composure cracking slightly. We need to talk. Yes, I agreed. We do. Her office still smelled of Dad's aftershave and her designer fragrance, an odd combination that seemed to fit the moment. She closed the door behind us. Whatever you think you found, she began, whatever you're planning to tell the board. Sit down, Elena. To my surprise, she did. For a moment, I saw past the power suit and perfect makeup to the little girl who used to build sandcastles with me. I connected my laptop to her office TV, started playing the files. Emails appeared. Bank statements. The video of Dad. Elena's face went from pale to ashen as she watched our father's last message. When it ended, she sat in silence for a long moment. I never meant, she whispered finally. It started small. Just a little extra padding on the bids. Then the shell companies seemed so easy. Nobody was getting hurt. Nobody getting hurt. I pulled up the employee list she'd marked for termination. These people have families, Elena. Mortgages. Kids in college. Dad treated them like family because they are family. You don't understand. She stood up, anger and fear warring in her voice. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? Perfect Michael, Dad's chosen one. I had to prove I could do more, be more. By stealing, by destroying what he built, by making it better, more efficient, more profitable, more soulless, I cut in. This company isn't just about profits, Elena. It's about building things that last. It's about trust. She sank back into her chair. So that's it? You'll show this to the board, have me arrested, take everything. I looked at my watch, 8:55 a.m. The board would be gathering now. No, I said quietly. Her head snapped up. What? I pulled out a thick folder, not the evidence from the USB drive, but something else I'd spent the weekend preparing. This is a new company structure, I explained, sliding it across the desk. You and I as equal partners. A new board of directors that includes some of our longest-serving employees, profit sharing for the workers, and a mandatory ethics oversight committee. She stared at the folder. I don't understand. It's called mercy, Elena. Dad's last lesson to both of us. I leaned forward. You'll step down as CEO, take a position as Chief Strategy Officer instead. I'll handle operations. Together, we'll build something better than either of us could alone. And if I refuse? I gestured to my laptop where Dad's video was frozen on his tired face. Then I'll show the board everything. But I don't think you will refuse, because despite everything, you're still a builder at heart. And builders don't destroy, they create. Tears slipped down her cheeks, smearing her perfect makeup. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to prove yourself. I know. I stood up, walked around the desk, and did something I hadn't done in years. I hugged my sister. So prove yourself now. Help me make this right. She clung to me for a moment, then straightened up, wiping her eyes. The board's waiting. Yes, they are. Ready to build something new. The board meeting that morning wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of exposures and accusations, they heard our joint vision for Martinez Construction's future. Elena, her voice steady despite her red eyes, presented the new ethics policies she would oversee. I outlined our plans for sustainable growth that maintained our father's values. One by one, the board members nodded their approval. They'd known our father, understood what he built went beyond balance sheets and profit margins. Afterward, as employees gathered for the announcement of the new structure, I caught Elena looking at Dad's old painting. I wanted to take it down, she admitted. It reminded me too much of him. A feeling like I was never enough. I touched the frame gently. Maybe we keep it up. As a reminder. Of what? That the most important things are often hidden from view. Like safes behind paintings, or love behind high expectations. She managed a small smile. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. 2 of them, actually. Over the next year, Martinez Construction transformed. Not into the soulless corporation Elena had envisioned or the unchanged monument to the past I'd wanted to preserve, but something new, something better. The equipment division modernized but stayed in-house. Employees got profit sharing and seats on the board. Elena's financial skills, once used for deception, now drove legitimate growth and innovation. Dad's painting still hangs in what is now our shared office. Sometimes late at night when I'm working late, I swear I can smell his aftershave, feel his presence. You did good, son, I imagine him saying. Both of you did good. The safe behind the painting is empty now. We don't need it anymore. The real treasures, trust, forgiveness, family, aren't things you can lock away. Elena and I still disagree sometimes. She pushes for faster growth. I argue for caution. But now we talk, really talk, about the fears and hurts behind our positions. We're learning to be siblings again, partners in preserving and growing our father's legacy. Last week, we broke ground on a new project, affordable housing for veterans. Elena's idea, backed by my construction expertise. As we stood there in our hard hats, I caught her smiling at the workers, greeting them by name, asking about their families. What? She demanded, catching my grin. Nothing, I said. Just thinking Dad would be proud. She was quiet for a moment, watching the sunrise paint the sky the same colors as his old painting. Of both of us, she said finally. Yeah, I agreed. Of both of us. The last photo I have of my father still sits on my desk, but next to it now is a new one. Elena and me at the Veterans Housing groundbreaking, both in hard hats, both smiling. Building something new. Together. Sometimes the greatest buildings aren't made of steel and concrete. Sometimes they're built with forgiveness, understanding, and second chances. Dad taught us how to build structures that would stand the test of time. But his last lesson, hidden in that old safe, taught us how to build something even more lasting, a bridge back to each other.